comprehensive immigration reform, I will follow up with my top 10 reasons why it will never happen. When I think about immigration from Mexico to the United States, I like to go way back. Think here of 4 fingers. Now the fingers aren't the right length, okay? But you have this finger, which is the first wave of immigration from Mexico, the first settling of people from Mexico into what is now the United States. And that is in 1598, when Juan de Oñate came from the interior of Mexico and started to settle what we now know as the Rio Grande Valley, the area around Santa Fe. That's 410 years ago. Okay. The next effort was right here, and that was the effort that culminated in the founding of Tucson and the beautiful mission there, San Javier del Bac. The good fathers really didn't get those things established till about 1700, but what that tells me is that Arizona, also known as Arizona, was settled, began to be settled by people of Mexican descent 310 years ago. Okay? The next wave, the next finger emerging from the interior of Mexico, emphasized the area around San Antonio. And it was in the 17-teens that San Antonio, the next part is somewhat famous. San Antonio, or in San Antonio, was established the mission San Antonio del Alamo. That is something that has come to be known to us as the Alamo. That mission was founded in the 17-teens. Okay? And that's such an interesting thing to me. I mean, if I go and I see the Alamo and I try and get away from all these narratives about it, I'm taken with how it is that the Alamo is this 300-year-old monument to the settlement of people from the interior of Mexico in Texas. And it was that, of course, until 1836, when it became something entirely different. Something that, of course, we never remember is that the Alamo, as a place where the Spanish priests sought to literally destroy Indian peoples and their cultures and their religions, to Indian people, native people, the Alamo was something entirely different. Right? Then we have here the 4th finger, if you will, and that is the one that extended up from Baja California, both by boat and later by an overland route that didn't last long, to establish the missions of California, beginning in 1769 at what some people call San Diego, I think of as San Diego Alcalá. Just up the road there, you can go to Mission San Luis Rey, established only a few years after San Diego in 1769. And if you go there on Saturday evening, Saturday early evening, you witness a very interesting thing. You watch, my guess is largely undocumented, I don't know, largely undocumented Mexican immigrants going into Mission San Luis Rey to worship. In other words, that is something that has been going on there. I mean, worshiping at that mission by people coming from the interior of Mexico, that's been going on for 230 years. So, to me, one of the curious things is that it's very difficult to interrupt what seems to me to be a pretty powerful historical momentum. That is something that started in 1598 in New Mexico. It continues on, of course. I mean, I'm always taken with my own family history. An ancestor of mine, Francisco Sotomayor, rode a pack train from Sonora, Mexico, up to the area that is now the San Francisco Bay region. This was in the 1830s. He brought mercury back from New Almaden back to the interior of Mexico for gold mining. Then I think of, I have to tell you this. I mean, you can tell something about what I think about all these things. In 1922, my grandmother and grandfather took their then 6-year-old son, my father, from Ciudad Juarez to El Paso. And along with a couple of brothers and sisters, they simply walked across the border. What they did is something that is quite in sync with what had been going on for a couple hundred years before and continued on until this day. Of course, in the 1920s, 1 million or so Mexican people migrated from the interior of Mexico, mostly to California, but mostly to California and Texas, but also to Chicago and Detroit and all manner of other places. So when I think about this issue of the border and what we're looking at today, and I will disagree with the person who introduced me, I think it creates huge problems. And it creates huge problems in the psyches of many people. It creates huge problems for local governments, huge problems for the public school system, huge problems for people who are already living here and who work in manual positions, manual jobs, and we'll get back to that, I'm sure, in the discussion. But this is probably what we're witnessing now, the third great wave of migration from the interior of Mexico. That is the migration that happened when Mexico was New Spain, when it was part of the Spanish Empire. And then the migration that happened in the 1920s. In some ways, the migrations from the Bracero program, that disastrous program of the 1940s and 50s, is really part of that. And I'd say that now we are really in the second great migration. So there's some history, but I don't just do history. I really want to give you my top 10 reasons why nothing's going to change.